Aloha and welcome to Keolahouhawaiianchurch Church this morning. We're going to have a sermon with Roxanne later after this song. So we'd like to wish you a happy morning, and then we're going to do Kanaka Bye Bye.
Good morning. As you can see, we're wearing our masks and being ready to record this as safely as possible. I'm Pastor Roxanne, WhiteLight, and I'm so happy to be with you this morning. As I look out on the empty pews, I'm imagining all of your faces, and I'm imagining the love and joy and happiness that I feel amongst you when I come and be with you. So even though you're not here, the love and happiness that you generate remains in this building. And I know it will be a happy day when all of us can come back permanently to the building. But until that time, we're going to do the best that we can to continue spreading the love of God. You probably can't see, but outside the window is the line for the food pantry. And that's one of the most tangible and amazing ways that you continue to spread the love of God in this community, even though you're not worshiping in your sanctuary. So thank you very much for having me here today. And the text that we're going to study today is from Romans, chapter 12, verses 9 through 21. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil and hold fast to what is good. Love one another in mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit to serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering and persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and extend hospitality to the stranger. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than they are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought in what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, as far as it depends upon you, live peaceably with all. Here ends the reading. So the Apostle Paul is the attributed author to this letter. He's writing from the town of Corinth in Asia Minor, and he's writing to the new church that's forming in Rome. We think he's writing around the year 57, and we know that this is one of his later letters. So if you've studied Paul very much, you know that his earlier letters are really written to churches where he knows they're having specific problems, and they're churches that he's started. So they often have this kind of scolding tone to them because he knows the people involved, and he's kind of putting the finger on them and speaking directly to them in his letters. But Paul did not found the church in Rome. He actually hadn't been there at this time, and he called upon Phoebe, who is one of the early church leaders, to deliver this letter to Rome. So we do know that. So the early church in Rome was just getting started, right? It was living under the guise of persecution. So they were trying to make it up as they went along, much like many of us are trying to do during the pandemic, right? We don't know exactly how things are going to look. We don't know what we can do or not do. We don't know what we're going to get in trouble for or get arrested for. So it's an uncertain time for the church in Rome, just like it's an uncertain time for us. Paul was trying to help them get off to a good start. And so this letter sounds a little bit like the instructions that you give when you're performing a marriage ceremony. It's very hard as the officiant in a wedding to avoid giving advice. And so oftentimes a wedding sounds like, you get out a checklist and you're informing the bride and groom, well, do this, don't do this, do that. You're trying to give them what you've learned as sort of a handbook to a happy marriage. And so this reading sounds a little bit like that. He hasn't met the people there, but he's trying to give them advice for what he's learned, right, as he's gone along and started these other churches. What are the things he can do that will help a little bit? So these words were applicable to a new church starting in Rome, and Paul's trying to give them the benefit of what he's learned. But they're also very applicable to a 100-year-old little church by the ocean spray that's reeling from a pandemic, uncertainty about direction, overcome with grief about the loss of singing, which is a mainstay in church worship, and also the loss of visitors to the island. This little church that has an awesome ministry to the community, a food pantry that's become even more important since the federal boost for unemployment has ended, and more people are concerned about feeding their families. In times when we're less confident, it's easy for us to become more crabby. It just seems to be a fact of life. I imagine there's some of you who are either parents or grandparents who have been sitting around the table trying to help your kids do their virtual online education. And things aren't working right. You can't get the computer to do what you want to do, or you can't get your kids to do what you want them to do, or you can't remember how to do the thing that they're studying. And it's a time of feeling less confident. And it's easy when we feel less confident to be more short-tempered. I was talking to my neighbor a couple days ago, and he said, yeah, it's really hard. He said, my office is in my son's room. My wife's office is in my daughter's room. My kids' school is at the kitchen table. We don't really have anywhere to eat, and then we have to take everything off to get ready to eat again. He said, so it's very confusing for all of us, and our tempers have been flying some of the time. So I think that the advice that Paul is offering is advice for times just like this. When we don't know our way, when we feel less confident, when things have changed, and it's easy for us to be short-tempered or crabby. And the advice that Paul offers is really hard. You know, it's really tough advice to put into practice. It sounds a lot like Jesus as far as loving your enemies and helping strangers and feeding the person that you don't know. And especially in hard times, it's difficult advice to live into. So I'm going to just pick up a few things from the reading that I think makes a contribution to any faith community that's struggling right now. So I'm going to read the line from the text, and then I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. I know there are a handful of you holding this church together, just like all of the little churches across the country that have been totally disrupted by this pandemic. Some of you have different ideas about how to move forward. Some people want to meet back in the building. Some people want to meet virtually. Some people don't know what to do. Some people want to start singing. Some people feel that it's not safe to sing. So these are normal disagreements when we don't know what to do. And it's easy for tempers to fly. And what Paul is telling us is to be devoted to one another in love, which means that we step back from our disagreement and say to each other, we all want the same thing. We all want something good for our church. We all want our church to emerge and thrive for the next 100 years. We have different ideas about how to get there, but let's remember the big picture. Let's remember what we all love, and let's honor each other in the fact that we're all trying to solve problems that we've never had to solve before. So it's taking that little bit of a step back and being devoted to one another in love means honoring the fact that you're all giving time and energy to keep this working, right? Valuing the ideas of others. Giving ideas that are different from your own adhering is how we give honor to one another instead of just sticking to our own ideas. Sometimes it means listening longer, listening to what people care about repeatedly until a third or fourth option emerges that can get the support of everyone. Another line, verse 12. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. Well, being joyful in hope now is a challenge for many of us. Each of us remember how things used to be, right? Those Sunday mornings when we'd be here singing away, having a great time together. And the hope that that will return is very real. But it's hard when the church pews are empty to feel and remember that joy. So this be joyful in hope requires us to think a little bit beyond our immediate circumstance, and to make sure that we as a community are making space to still claim joy in spite of our upside down lives. Just the joy that we can claim for offering this food pantry to the community is huge, right? We can be proud of that for ourselves. Claim that as a joy that we're able to keep doing that. During times like this, it's tough to be our best selves. And especially when we feel like we're all a little bit incarcerated in our homes or our small communities and we're not going anywhere. So giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Being patient in affliction is also a tough one, because about now where most of us would say, somebody stepped on our last nerve, right? Our trip to the mainland to see our family was canceled. We can't even go to the park and have our first birthday party with our family group if we don't all live together. So it's a time to be patient in affliction, and it's a difficult time to do that. So giving each other the benefit of the doubt and knowing that this isn't easy for anyone. There's losses that all of us are experiencing economically and relationally because of this pandemic. Our community needs to hang together. We need all of us to stay involved to make it through this disruption. And then the third part, faithful in prayer. Well, this church is a praying church. You tell people that every Sunday. And while we often think of praying for our individual members, it's really important to pray for our church as a community, even when we're not in the building together. However you do your daily devotions, I have a little notepad that I have with my devotional reading, and I write on it the names of people that I'm praying for who are going through something. Write your church, write the members of your community on that pad yourselves, so that you're remembering that this prayer that we're being faithful in is part of what will help hold us together and get us through this. And you're holding it together for the food pantry and the people who will come to worship here in the future. And the last one, verse 18, if it is possible, as far as it depends upon you, live at peace with everyone. Now, I really appreciate that Paul acknowledges that it's not 100% possible all of the time to live in peace with everyone. And I also really appreciate that we're held accountable only for our part of the relationship. As I like to say as a marriage counselor, each person individually is responsible 100% for their 50% of the relationship. So in this way, when it's possible, you can't change other people, you can't get them to agree with you, but we're responsible for doing what we can for our part of every individual relationship. Is there someone that you need to make amends to? Someone who you need to listen to again? Someone who needs our support for their struggle, even though we might not be able to solve their problem? We can have compassion for their struggle because we all have struggles right now. When it feels that living in that kind of peace is not possible, when a relationship doesn't seem like people can live peaceably together, that's the time to revert back to verse 12. Be faithful in prayer. Because we know that God's guidance and love helps us to see a way forward. Our ability to continue to feed God's people, as we're doing right outside this window, depends on us continuing to live out Paul's instructions to the best of our ability. In this time of political polarization, it's especially difficult to live peacefully with people who hold opposing views. And that is where faithful prayer is the only solution. Taking an issue to God, who is bigger than us and bigger than what divides us, a God that holds us all gently, and a God that blesses us no matter what our views might be. Paul is writing to the early church in Rome, but his difficult and essential advice rings down through the centuries. For the advancement of the love of God depends on each of us. And even in the toughest circumstances, it's our opportunity to work together to see the face of God in each other. Amen.
I want to say aloha to everyone. We are at Keolahouhawaiianchurch Church, and this is a little song about this church. And one of the most important lines in this song is that, it talks about this little church by the ocean spray. And that's so important because that ocean spray is also the spirit that comes into this church and through these doors. So this is a song about Keolahouhawaiianchurch.